Welcome to the Christian Romance Podcast, where we go behind the books with inspiring Christian romance authors, exploring faith, love, and the journey that brings the story to life. I'm your host, Kelly Jo Wilson, and today we're chatting with Elizabeth Musser. Elizabeth writes what she calls entertainment with a soul, from her writing chalet, a cozy tool shed, just outside Lyon, France. A Carol Award winner and finalist for both the Christie Award and Georgia Author of the Year, Elizabeth's critically acclaimed novels have been translated into multiple languages and become international bestsellers. Alongside her husband, Paul, Elizabeth has served with the nonprofit One Collective for over 40 years. Be sure to stay tuned to the end of the episode so you can hear about our newest book giveaway. Now, here's my conversation with Elizabeth. Hi, Elizabeth. I am so happy to have you on the Christian Romance Podcast today. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, and merci beaucoup pour l'invitation. Ça m'a fait tellement plaisir. Thank y'all for listening. It's a great pleasure to be here.
Oh my gosh, I love it. I love that I was going to ask you before whenever we started recording, but then we were getting it was like an interview before the interview. But I was going to say, yes, you must know French because you've lived there for so long and you go back and forth through there. I absolutely love it. So why don't you actually just start by letting our listeners know, if they don't already, I'm sure they do because you're wonderful books, but just let them know a little more about you and how you got started on your writing journey.
I would be delighted. So ever since I was 6 years old, I knew what I wanted to be when I grew up. I wanted to be a writer. And I really, Kelly, I could not write. It was just the way I expressed myself. And I asked my questions about life and love and faith. And at 6, I started writing poems. And I will recite one for you right now. It is called
I love it.
My Pony. So I have a little pony. I ride him all around, but when I take him over jumps, he throws me on the ground. So that was my 6-year-old poem. And I wrote a bunch about animals. I'll give you one more. I did have a pony, but this one is about my cow. I did not have a cow at the time. But anyway, I have a cow. She moos and moos, but when she sees grass, she chews and chews. So,
I love it.
So, these were pretty deep poems for a sister.
You know what? Let me just tell you, it takes a lot to try to get the correct flow and the cadence. And girl, you have talent.
So anyway, I'm 6 years old. And then and I was always writing poems and stories for my family. And at 9, I started what I presumptuously called my first novel, because I wanted to be the youngest writer ever. And that novel remains unpublished to this day. So anyway, I was writing. I loved writing. And I had encouragement when I was young from my teachers. And I would pray, Lord, if you want to do something with this writing gift, more than I'm doing, show me. But I'll back up. So 6 years old, I was writing. 9, I started my first book. But, and that was my passion. That is what I wanted to do. But I also had another passion, and that was to know God. And I attended a big old church with my parents and my brother, and I loved Sunday school and learning Bible verses and hearing Bible stories. And around the age of 9, I understood the basics of the Christian gospel, that God had created me in his image, and he wanted to have a relationship with us. But even I, as a 9-year-old, could understand I could never be good enough to merit God's favor. And so God did something extraordinary for me. And it's the first Bible verse I memorized. I'm sure you know it, and many of our listeners probably know it too. But for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have eternal life. And so with basically the innocence and sincerity of a child, I did that. I believed. And I like to say no one pushed me. There was no pressure on me, not our pastor or my Sunday school teacher or my parents. But I really believe God drew me to himself, and I loved him. And so I had this other passion. I wanted to serve the Lord. So you've got my writing and my faith in Jesus were the two passions that basically have guided my whole life. So as I was going through life, I would often pray, Lord, if you want me to do something more with my writing, please show me. And I'd say, Lord, I would love to write a novel and dedicate it to my grandmom while she's still alive, because she had been such an encouragement to me. So fast forward, I've gone to high school and then college, and I've majored in French and English. And I wanted to major in creative writing, but I thought no one can make any money doing that. So I'll try to look like I know what I'm doing, and I'll major in French and English literature, which we must say is hardly more lucrative, but whatever. And I had the opportunity to spend a semester in France when I was a junior in school. And I saw the Lord opened my eyes to a whole new culture in the old culture of Europe. But I also saw that the cathedrals in France, they were these gorgeous cathedrals that were empty. And there was such a spiritual apathy in France. So those months overseas, they really changed me. I came back to the States, and I went to a fairly prestigious school, and there was a lot of wealth there. And I was, all of a sudden, I didn't feel like I fit in at all. I'd seen something different. I wanted to move beyond kind of a stereotypical Southern life that I had been raised in, and but didn't know what to do. And during my senior year, I attended Kicking and Screaming. The young woman that I went to France with, and we were roommates in France. She had said she had joined or signed up to go to a missions conference, and it's called Urbana, and it's a 5-day missions conference in between Christmas and New Year's, and it's all about, there are like 300 mission agencies there and lots of speakers. Anyway, she had signed up and she couldn't go, and she said, "Oh, Elizabeth, you're interested in missions. Why don't you go and take my ticket?" And I'm like, "No, I'm not interested in missions." And in my mind, I wanted to serve the Lord full time, but I did not want to be the children's director at a church. That wasn't my gifting. And in my mind, missionary was a little old lady dressed in black with her hair pulled back in a bun, and she was probably in a country with a lot of bugs and snakes. And I was just like, nope, not interested. But I went to this conference, Kicking and Screaming, and in my heart, I was a good Christian girl on the outside. There I met there were a few little old ladies dressed in black, but there were a lot of young, enthusiastic missionaries, and there were so many different mission agents represented, and a lot that were sending missionaries to France, several that were sending missionaries to France. And making a long story short, I felt what is known as a call. At the end of this 5-day conference, we took communion, and they handed out a little card, and you could check, I'm going to pray for missionaries. I'd like to receive more information about missions. There were, 5 or 6 possibilities. And the bottom one said, I believe God is calling me into missions. And it was like an out-of-body experience. I checked this, and I was like, oh my goodness, what am I doing? But God called me into missions in France. And so right after I graduated from Vanderbilt in Nashville, Tennessee, I headed to the mission field. And it was a short-term mission. And that meant 8 months of training in Chicago with your team, and then 2 years on the mission field. And so I thought, well, it's short term, there's training, and I go with a team. I can handle that. That was in 1982. And much to everyone's surprise, including my own, I left for the mission field after for this short term. Well, this August we will celebrate. My husband and I will celebrate our 43rd year with this mission agency.
I love it.
And
praise Jesus.
A week later, we will celebrate our 40th wedding anniversary because he was the cute single guy on the team. I say it took me 3 years to convince him to stay on the same team for the rest of our lives. But anyway, it's just the Lord has been so faithful in that. And my journey, I would say, if you ask me what to describe in one word, my life in missions in France and my life as a writer, I would say humbling. Because doesn't the Lord, he breaks us before he uses us, right? We have to have that humility. And I went to the mission field thinking I was going to help, but I couldn't speak the language well. People did not give one iota of care that I came from a prestigious school and I had all these, awards or whatever. All they wanted to know was, could I speak their language and could I learn of their culture? And if Jesus that I talked about meant something in my life. So it was a huge, huge time of just humbling and breaking me and me learning about confession and all kinds of, and about the Lord's provision. I learned that in as much as you trust the Lord to provide for your every need, he will do it. So all that is my missions experience. After my short term, came back to the States, got married to that cute young man, and then we went back as career missionaries. And I'm praying all this time, Lord, if you want me to do something more with my writing, then show me. And what I decided was, so then I had a toddler and a newborn when we got back moved back overseas to France. And I decided to make my quarterly prayer letters that we sent out to, like 500 people back in the States, the best writing I could do. And so a lot of people wrote me and said, Elizabeth, you have a writing gift. You should write a book, which had been my desire, since I was a little girl. And so I like to say, if you notice a gift in somebody, tell them, because you may be the person the Lord is using to keep that dream alive. And those people kept my dream alive.
Aww.
So every 2 years, we would come back to the States for just 2 months in the summer. Our boys were in French school, so they only had 2 months in the summer. And we would come back for what was called a furlough back then, to visit churches and individuals who supported our ministry, because we were on support from churches and from individuals. And I attended my first writers conference. And this was 1994, so a long time ago, before email, before Google, before the World Wide Web. And I found out that at this conference, you could meet with 2 editors, and you could sign up ahead of time. And one of the editors of a publishing house, he had been a missionary in France with my mission agency years before. And I knew him.
Oh my gosh.
And so I was just shocked.
That's crazy.
So went into my interview with him with my little dossier with all my, what I'd written. And I was scared to death. And I said, Dave, I'd like to write a woman's devotional. I didn't know what to say, but, and Dave, he's very gentlemanly. And he said, well, Elizabeth, we don't need that. But we are looking for a woman novelist. And I said, oh, I can do that too. And I felt like the Lord had put me at the right place at the right time, because a publisher never says, we need a woman novelist. They are usually saying, we don't like we're throwing your manuscript in the slush pile. So I learned at that conference how to write a professional book proposal. went back to France, worked my tail off, sent Dave through snail mail a book proposal. He liked it. He said, I'm going to present it to the committee in 2 weeks, and they decide on contracts. And I said, well, what does that mean? And he said, well, they could say, we're not interested. Or they could say, that sounds like an interesting idea. Write the book and then send it to us, after you've written it. Or they could just flat out offer you a contract. And 2 weeks later, Dave calls me long distance in France and says, you want to write a book? And I had my contract for my first novel. Aww. So it was like a dream come true, but I say it was a dream preceded by almost 30 years of writing and praying, because I had been praying since I was 6 years old that I could write, and I was 34. And so I say every day that I sat at my little IBM, huge computer, it felt like a hug from the Lord. So that is how I got started in writing. That was a long story, but it's about the Lord has, it was really the Lord being with me all the time. And just continue. I like to say too, for aspiring writers, if you're writing, you're a writer already, right? But just write, and pray. That's my formula. And then I always suggest attending a writer's conference, maybe not 10 conferences. They're kind of pricey, but, just to learn what's going on in today's market and how to present your book and all. So I'm very thankful for writers conferences. And so we've been in France for all these years, but about, so we have 2 sons. Andrew is married to Lacey, and they have 5 kids, and they live in Lafayette, Georgia. And then Chris is married to Ashley, and they got married a few years ago, and they are in Washington, D.C. And even so, our job for many years, we were working in French churches, French evangelical churches, and trying to work under French leadership just to help. And we didn't want to establish American churches. We wanted it to be French. But then about 15 years ago, the president of our mission, he asked us to, instead of working in French churches, to do pastoral care for missionaries all over the world. And so for the past 15 years, we still have been in France a lot of the time, but we travel a lot, and we do a lot of calls on Zoom or on WhatsApp or Skype, so even before COVID, we were doing a lot by online. And so our boss said, as long as you have an airport and internet, you can work anywhere you want. And so to be closer to our family, our aging parents, the grandkids and kids, we now spend half our time in the States and half the time in France. And we live, when we're in the States, which is where I am right now, I am in the booming metropolis of Flintstone, Georgia. Yabba dabba doo. And I say, I have yet to see Pebbles and Bam Bam, but I dress up as Wilma for Halloween. So that's, anyway, so now we're doing, like halftime in the States and halftime in France, which we considered a huge blessing. We just say, Lord, as long as we are able to keep doing this, we will keep doing it. And we get to meet with our missionaries in the States too. So we have kind of a revolving door in our house, and people are often visiting, but a lot of our work is online too.
That's wonderful. And I just love so much how God has really guided that whole journey for you, and you're just so humbling. And you said something that I want to comment on it just before I forget. You said about how it's humbling because he's always breaking us, right? He's breaking us in. And it made me think, like, I used to think all the time, and just like how you said you thought whenever you were younger, like you were young enough to, or you were young, but you were old enough to understand that you weren't good enough, essentially, right? Like
Right.
you're not going to be good enough to
Right.
meet that standard. So I used to always think, because my main thing is just this brokenness, right? That's like what I address in my writing as well, and this brokenness. And I just, one day I feel like God was just guiding that thought about brokenness. And it's so funny because there's two sides to it, right? Like there's a brokenness of where we're broken in our choices and in our sin, and we come to him continually, right?
Yeah.
Always surrendering. But then there's another kind of brokenness that's a healthy, good brokenness. Like you said, he's breaking us in, like as if breaking
A horse.
house breaking a dog or a horse.
Yeah.
Exactly. And you're like breaking the horse to get to do like what you want to do. So it's kind of sounds like with your journey, all those prayers certainly when answered, he wanted to break you in a little bit with the missions. And I mean, I can't even imagine. I mean, just think about the impact for so many years. You and your husband are doing these missions, and what was short term became long term, and you just built this life. And then
Yeah.
out of nowhere, here comes Dave, who has a very similar same mission. I mean, that is
It's the Lord.
completely God. Yes, that is so him
It
working in your life like a big flashing sign. I love it so much, Elizabeth. I'm so happy you shared that. I think that it's just so inspiring.
well, and I say too, what I love to address deep themes in my novels, and
Mhm.
I've written 15 novels now. I've been doing this for 30 years. I am in awe of my writer friends who write a book a year or even 2 books a year. I'm slow. Every 2 years about I can get a book out. But what I so much so often, even though my novels are often historical, I use conversations I'm inspired by the people I work with, and I want my characters. They're not all cookie cutter, right? They're complex
Mm.
people, and they are broken. And I feel like, and I say, I have a different Bible verse for each of my novels. When I sign a Bible verse, and so the different themes. Like for instance, this novel, From the Valley We Rise, is about brokenness, and I say, not that these big themes in my story, these deep themes, have anything to do with my life. It's not but of course it is. It's what the Lord is teaching me. And I say often, I like to almost bug my readers with how the Lord is bugging me, and in the sense of pushing me forward in that sanctification in my Christian life. Those challenges. And so I was gonna, I know you're asking me, do I have a special Bible verse? And for this novel, so it's all about building back from the ruins. That
Mm.
is the theme, from the brokenness. And I can tell you a little bit more, about the plot and the setting in a minute. But years and years ago, like in 2000, I did a Beth Moore study called Breaking Free. The verses it was based on Isaiah 61 verses 1 through 4, and they are some of my absolute favorite verses. So I will read them to you, and they are the verses that I use in this book. But the Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is on me, because the Lord has anointed me to preach good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim freedom for the captives and release from darkness for the prisoners, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor and a day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all who mourn and provide for those who grieve in Zion, to bestow on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of gladness instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. They will be called oaks of righteousness, a planting of the Lord for the display of his splendor. And now this is the verse, the next one I read, that is the theme of the novel. They will rebuild the ancient ruins and restore the places long devastated. They will renew the ruined cities that have been devastated for generations. And
that's wonderful.
From the Valley We Rise is literally about a city that is destroyed during World War II. And it's also about building back from the ruins a village. So I can tell you more about that in a minute, but and here's my little, it's backwards, isn't it? Can you read it?
No, I can read it. Yeah,
okay.
I can read it.
So it's a quote from the book, but it says, "We're building back the ruins. All will be used for good." And to me, that's, one of the main themes in the novel. God can redeem it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much for reading those verses too. My goodness, it's so encouraging, and I just get all tingly. As soon as you start reading the verses, I'm like, oh, it's just because it's so comforting, and it's really like, it just gives this such hope, and I feel like your whole story has been about that, right? Your whole life, not like, your whole life story, but everything that you just shared, like go do with these missions, and getting these people to come to Jesus and to know Jesus, and all of your work and everything that you do has really been, about centered on him. And you just have been trying to reach the poor and reach people that feel broken. And I just love that. I think it's such a wonderful impact. And it's just a perfect verse for that. And also too, and just reading a little bit about the book, it definitely sounds like it's absolutely perfect for this. Like you said, it's about a city. Why don't you talk about the setting a little bit?
So the story takes place in August of 1944 during what is known as the second D-Day, the Allied invasion of Provence. And it was called Operation Dragoon. Now, I have lived in France for almost 40 years, and I knew a lot about the French resistance, and I've written another novel about, that has parts of it about World War II. I had done, I knew a lot, but I had never heard of Operation Dragoon, and it's so interesting, or at least I hadn't heard much about it. But so anyway, I was doing a debrief at a little a village called Entrepierre. Entrepierre means literally between the stones, and it's this little village in the Haute Alpes of Provence. So in the Alps, the lower Alps of Provence, and it is between the Alps. It's just a gorgeous valley setting, and I found out that a nearby city, it's called Sisteron. I knew Sisteron, I'd visited it, but I found out that during Operation Dragoon, August 1944, when the Allies were coming into Provence to liberate the ports so that tankers could get supplies in and they could chase the Germans out, the Americans, well, the Allies, Americans, the French, and others were bombing bridges to stop the German retreat. And in this town of Sisteron, instead of bombing the bridges, well, they bombed the bridges, but mistakenly bombed the city. And over 100 civilians, women, children, and older men who weren't in the war were killed, and it devastated the city. And so that in my novels, I like to take a little known parts of history and bring them alive for the reader. And I thought, wow, we all know about the Normandy D-Day invasion, but I did not know about this invasion. And I wanted to explore that theme of mistakes. Obviously, it was a terrible mistake. So each of my characters has to deal with guilt, and they have regret, and they have made, or they see themselves as having made mistakes. So one of my main characters is Isabelle, and she's a young French woman, a young Catholic French woman who's a part of the resistance, and with her father, she's been helping part of a network to save Jewish orphans whose parents have either been sent to camps or been killed. And so she has been, for the past 2 years, helping her father get these Jewish children to different homes, just ordinary French citizens hiding them in their homes throughout that part of France. And then my other main character is a young man named Peter, and he is in the Army, the U.S. Army. He's a chaplain. And Peter has had a very traumatic thing happen in his first pastorate, and which he thought was going to disqualify him from serving the Lord completely. And you don't know, he's had this happen, but you don't know what it is until late in the novel. But he finds out that he can be a chaplain. And so he's a chaplain in the Army, and he is on the boat, the tanker. There's there's multiple ships moving into Provence in August 1944. 80,000 troops are landing, and he is a chaplain for some of these men. And so he is trying to prepare them, but he's a fun-loving man, and he wants them to encourage them, but also prepare them for what's ahead. And so the story, eventually they will meet up, and there's a backstory to these two characters. And there's also a young cousin of Isabel. So as Isabel's about 25, her cousin Renee is 15. And this is based on a true story. Again, I do all this research, and then I just enjoy putting little bits and pieces into the story. Renee is at his farmhouse, and he is sheltering one of these Jewish children. Her name is Delphine. That's her fake name. Her real name is Sarah, but she's changed her name. And a whole army, German battalion attacks the farmhouse. They think there are many guerrilla warfare soldiers at the farmhouse, and there are really only 5 of them. And so Renee hides who he calls his sister, Delphine, in the wine cave. And he and these 4, they're called maquisards. It's the boy soldiers, really, who are hiding out, and they've gotten to be part of the resistance, because otherwise they were going to be conscripted to work in German work camps. And so they're hiding out all over France in the woods. But these 4 are at the farmhouse, and the Germans attack them, and they kill the other 4 soldiers and Renee's mother. So Renee has this girl, Delphine, and he's trying to save her. So he goes to his cousin's house, who is in Sisteron, to see if she can help hide Delphine. So you've got these things. And then in the very beginning of the story, Isabel's dad, he's a forger. He has been arrested, and he is murdered by the Germans. So Isabel feels like she has all this regret if he lets himself be captured to protect his daughter. So you've got Renee, this young 15-year-old, is motivated by revenge. Isabel is motivated to save these Jewish orphans. She feels so guilty about her dad's death, but she wants to redeem that. And her father told her long ago, she's motivated by fear. She's terrified about the things she's being asked to do. But her father told her years ago, Isabel, courage is not a lack of fear. Courage is fear that has said its prayers. So she is struggling through these issues. And then Peter has deep regret. He's seen so much carnage. He's been in North Africa, and I found out so much about these chaplains. I mean, they go in, they carry no weapons. they go in and they have a soldier who is with them who has weapons, but they are on the battlefield. And then afterwards, they are ministering to the dying and helping clear the battlefield. So, so you've got all that. And then the background is this upcoming invasion. And the first, so I was motivated by this whole story, right? And did all this research. But as I was doing the research, I realized that my first inspiration for this story came unbeknownst to me when in 1983, when my teammates and I had landed in France for our short-term mission. Our first mission was, we had a group of 20 young people from America come for 2 weeks. And what we did is we went to this little village and helped build back a village. And it was a village called Entrepierre, which means in between the stones. It's a village that's about 10 kilometers from Sisteron, the town that was destroyed during World War II. But this village, in real life, in the 1960s, a British couple had bought this village, and it kind of became like a L'Abri, a place where young people could come, hippies who were seeking and searching. And so, but the village was completely, I mean, it was in ruins. It's this stone village, an ancient stone village. And so for years, for like 30 years, different summer teams and different people from all over would come and help literally build back the ruins of this village. And it became, the dream of this missionary was for it to be a retreat center for pastors in France and for missionaries, which it has been. But in my book, it has another covert mission. And Isabel she has an idea of how to save the Jewish children, because when her father is killed at the beginning of this novel, she realizes there is a mole in the resistance. There is a traitor there. So they've got to find other places to keep these children. So anyway, but the whole thing is building back the ruins of what happens when the city is destroyed, but also this village. And it's a village that actually Isabel has attended when she was a camper, a young camper. And Peter, of course, has a connection with this village too. So I bring all these plots together. And there are 2 sweet love stories, which I just had so much fun creating. And
I'm sure I was going to ask you the love stories.
Yeah.
Sounds like
I can't give
Isabel
away
and
too
Peter.
Much. You can probably guess a little bit, but that too was, well, I can tell you one of the love stories is Renee.
Yes, no spoilers.
No spoilers. But you find out at the very beginning of the novel that Renee, he's 15, but he looks very young. He looks like he's about 12. And Delphine has been living in his house for 2 or 3 years, and she's this beautiful, mysterious, kind of mystical Jewish girl who has such beautiful faith. And she's gone from being his little kid sister to this blooming, beautiful adolescent, and he falls in love with Delphine. Well, he doesn't tell her, and he's 15, but his goal is to save Delphine's life. And he's in love with her, but I mean, again, he's just doing it. So it's a very sweet story of that sacrificial love, because he's not going to tell her or anything. But he is willing to die for her. So, and then Peter and Isabel will eventually meet, and there's some really sweet things that there's some hard things they have to deal with. There's another question. Like I said, I like to bug my readers. Peter feels like he's had this traumatic thing happen in his first pastorate in a little church in Kentucky. And you know that from the beginning of the book. You don't know what, and he says, going as a chaplain into the war, at least he will know who the enemy is. It's pretty clear. the Germans and the Allies, because there was betrayal in his what happened to him in his first pastorate. But I like to bug my readers. So yes, you know who the enemy is in the war, except for you don't. Because throughout the novel, I bring in ways where these characters see that the German soldiers are just terrified young boys doing what they have to do. Yeah. So I like to just ask all these questions. You know, what is betrayal? What happens within the church how can we, be betrayal? What is betrayal within the church? Anyway, like to make my readers think. So there you have it. I just I blubber on about this story, but I've loved creating it. I have pictures on my Instagram and Facebook, and there's a video now of all the places that the story takes place, because it's beautiful. There's lavender fields, there's Alps, there's deep valleys, there's it is just a beautiful part of France. So I invite listeners to go to my YouTube or my Instagram or Facebook and see pictures and videos of that setting.
Well, it sounds absolutely amazing. I love that you mentioned that. And of course, the love stories, with the romance podcast. But it does sound, I would imagine that as a chaplain, it would be tough because he doesn't carry a weapon. But also, like you said, war is so messy. And when you're looking at the other side of it, right, especially like World War II, you have these kids who are like, they had to go into the service, right? They have to fight for their country. And then there's so many questions surrounding it. Like, who are you really fighting for? Like, who is the real enemy? Because this young guy who doesn't want to be here any more than I do isn't really my enemy, but he's for the enemy on the other side. So that would really prompt a lot of questioning. And especially for someone who's trying to guide people and like hold them up in such a horrible time and kind of encourage them. I would imagine Peter's going through a really tough time with that.
And he talks about lament because, you see all this horror, and I also have the soldiers, which there were, every soldier had a Bible. They, FDR, after, he made sure that there was a Bible, and the president for every soldier. Faith was so important, and so I have a Jewish chaplain and a Catholic chaplain and a Protestant chaplain. I like to interweave, all these faiths, and what again, just asking questions. And what touched me so much was the chaplains what Peter does is he allows the soldiers to cry before him and say how scared they are. And he is trying to point them he says, I can't keep them necessarily safe on the battlefield, but I want them to be safe in their souls. And so there's that theme of, how to be safe. There's also the theme of just lamenting before the Lord, because how can this be happening? And just such the loss. And then I also, the resistance was messy. It was, there were traitors within the resistance and stuff. But what struck me, what touched me so much was these young boys like Renee and these young women like Isabel. They were risking their lives. They were just ordinary citizens doing the next thing, and they never talked about it afterwards. So there were these networks, saving all these people, hiding the Jews, putting their life at risk. And in real life, these networks, they never said anything. They didn't want the glory, and 50 years later, they have a reunion where they're getting people together. But I thought, nowadays, everybody wants the glory. Everybody, we worship the pastor instead of the Lord. And and it again, I'm asking, would I be that brave? Would the Lord, I know the Lord, it would have to be from the Lord to be able to put my life at risk, and be sacrificial for whatever he's asking. But I was so touched by, just the idea of this is, we don't have that feeling anymore, that patriotic or not, just we want to do the right thing. I mean, I'm not saying that's a generalization, but we're so much more individualistic now, I feel like, than that generation that went to war. And of course, there were many problems there too. I'm not saying that, but it was very convicting to me just to read of these ordinary heroes. And I got a lovely review from Library Journal, and the reviewers, he said, what does a missionary, an American missionary, a U.S. chaplain, a scared French girl, a 15-year-old farm boy, and a Jewish orphan have in common? And they are willing to fight evil. And he said at the end of the review, join this motley crew who become heroes overnight. And I thought, yeah, we're motley crews, aren't we? We're just clay, and will we let the Lord use us and mold us? So I learn a lot from my research, obviously, but from writing too. I'm preaching to myself, but I always ask the Lord just to speak to people's hearts, to encourage them. There's always that theme of redemption and hope. And I also love when a reader will read the novel and enjoy it, and maybe she's a believer, and she will give the novel to a friend who's might never darken the doors of a church, but will read a novel because a good friend suggested it. And I think that's part of our novels are hopefully a good story. I call my novels entertainment with a soul. I want people to find the soul in my story. But they're a tool too, just to share the hope of Jesus. And again, in a subtle way, but in a way that hopefully reaches through the pages of the book.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we talk about that a lot on the show because Jesus used stories as well to teach and to really reach people from all walks of life. I mean, really. So it's just, and that's just what a beautiful thing is about how he can use words, and how when you're co-creating with God, how he guides you through that process and just what people are needing at that moment. And he's such a living God, right? He so just knows us, and our hairs on our head are numbered, and he just knows us so well and exactly how to reach us, and through stories and through other ways too, which is just beautiful.
I so love hearing from readers who say, I feel like you were describing me. This is my story, and so I it's such a lovely I say every time I sit at my computer or get a reader letter, I feel like I'm getting a hug from the Lord, because I get to do what I love to do. There's a lot of hard parts about it too. And, I say the writer journey is like missions. It's a roller coaster. Again, just teaching us to do it for the Lord, but to do our best to write excellent fiction and let him do what he wants. But you do still have to do your business side too, right? Everybody has a part of their job they don't like, or they don't enjoy as much. I love doing podcasts. I don't as much love the business side before with my Instagram. I love interacting with readers, but the pressure that you feel to get to market yourself, that's hard.
Yes.
So we authors, I just want to say thank you, Kelly, for making this, giving us this medium to share, because word of mouth is the best way to find out about books, right? And we wouldn't have a job without readers, and you are helping us connect. And I know you're a writer also, so it's I really like to say thank you, merci for this opportunity. And on behalf of all of my writer friends, I know you have been such a blessing to so many of them. So very thankful for that, for this medium.
I'm thankful for you. You're so sweet. I'm thankful for you because it is important. It's important because it's one thing to have God calling you in a certain way, but then you don't want to put it under a bushel, right? Like you don't want to hide the lamp on, you want to have your light go out in the world. So absolutely. Any way that I can help to do that is also a blessing for me too, because I get to talk about these wonderful stories with you and just your journey. So thank you so much for sharing your heart and your journey with us, Elizabeth. I mean, it's just so inspiring. And the story sounds absolutely amazing. I cannot wait to read it. I usually stay in my little bubble of contemporary romance and, very sweet kind of things because I'm kind of a baby and it's hard for me to handle very tough things. But I also really love those deep themes because I feel like that redemption, especially and in that brokenness, is very you can just feel God's presence so much in that and in those stories. So I love it. Yeah. So where can readers connect best with you? Where can they find you and get on your newsletter? And then also where can they get a copy of From the Valley We Rise?
Yeah, so here we go. From the Valley We Rise. So first I have Instagram and Facebook, just, Elizabeth Musser, author. You can find me on I also have a YouTube channel. And again, Google it, you'll find me, right? But I have my website is just elizabethmusser.com. And so all the links are there and all my novels are there. And there's a page for From the Valley We Rise. And you can find the book at wherever books are sold right now. Well, actually, I was going to say right now, but the book hasn't come out yet, but it will have come out by the time where this is out. And so really anywhere, but I will say that Baker Bookhouse, so my publisher is Bethany House, and Baker Bookhouse has a 30% off and free shipping usually for new novels. But so I would say that's one place, but you can find all the indie bookstores are on the website too. And for my newsletter, I send a newsletter out about every other month. And there is a link right at the top, along with my link for Instagram and Facebook and Pinterest to join my newsletter. And if you join my newsletter right now, your gift is me reading the prologue and first chapter of From the Valley We Rise. So that is super fun.
Awesome. That is super fun. I will definitely have all those links in the show notes too. So nobody has to go searching too far because you just scroll right on down or go straight to the podcast website as well for her, for the links to the books and to get on your newsletter.
Thank you.
But thank you so much, Elizabeth. I mean, this was just such a joy to chat with you and just to hear your story and your experience and how God was certainly working through you and through your husband and just reaching all these people, and also in writing this beautiful story of these people who are so brave and just, through all of the horrors of war can find hope and a second chance and some redemption. And it's very encouraging. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. Merci. Just a delight.
If today's episode made you smile, don't forget to hit subscribe and tap the bell so you never miss a new release. We love blessing our listeners with heartfelt author conversations and, of course, plenty of great reads. And speaking of blessings, we're throwing a party. To celebrate one whole year of the podcast, we're hosting the Christian Romance Podcast Birthday Book Bash, a special giveaway featuring 12 incredible books. Because what's a birthday without gifts, right? But this is more than just a bundle of stories. It's a celebration of a year of faith, fiction, and friendship. These 12 books come from beloved author friends of the show who have shared not only their stories, but their hearts. Whether you're drawn to swoon-worthy contemporary romance, edge-of-your-seat romantic suspense, or sweeping historical love stories, this collection has something to bless every kind of reader. If you're listening in the future, no worries. You can always find our latest book giveaway on ChristianRomancePodcast.com. Thank you for being part of this beautiful first year. Here's to many more pages turned, episodes aired, and stories shared together. Thanks so much for listening, and until next time, keep your faith, share the love, and happy reading.